Okay, so this is my final project where I made an algorithm using statistics that were cross-compatible through every league to find the best sports team out of the four major uh, North American sports that we have, the big four, the NHL, NFL, MLB, and NBA. So I'll get into detail on each stat shortly, but just for like a broad view, um, what I did is I found every stat that was cross-compatible and that was relevant that all four leagues had. And then I found basically the common denominator, evened it out so that everyone would be equal, and then put a number that their stat would be multiplied by every year. Okay, so this slide got messed up a little bit, so I put the how it's supposed to be on the bottom there in the text. So hopefully you guys can get the picture, but anyways, how I did this was I took the average amount of wins that a team is going to get in a season for each league. So for the NHL and the NBA, it's the same because they play the same amount of games. So that average wins would be 41. And then for the NFL, since they only have a 16-game season, their average wins will be 8. And then the MLB plays 162, so theirs will be 81. So I found an amount of points that I wanted to be possible for a perfect season. So I set that at 85 points if a team were to win every regular season game. And then I divided that by their average, which gave me the number to multiply however many wins they get by the number. So obviously, like for NHL, it'll be 1.04 times however many wins they get. And then however many points that is for that season, it'll add on for all 5 seasons, if that makes sense. So for points for and points against, it was a similar process. I chose a common denominator, so I chose 50, which was 35 under what you would get for a perfect season if you had perfect scoring, which is still technically possible to get higher than, but it was just the highest that was ever done in each league. And then I found the average points that a team will score in a season for each league, which will obviously be the same for points against average. And then what I did is divided that by 50, and then it gave me the numbers that I can multiply their actual stats to. So for the NHL, it was 0.2022. For NBA, it was 0.0054, NFL 0.1435, and MLB 0.0740. Because, so obviously the MLB is lower and the NBA is lower because they have a lot more scoring, and the NFL is just a little bit higher because they have a little less scoring, but the NHL, you can see, has quite a bit more than most because there's a substantial amount less scoring in hockey than there is in the other sports. Next up is playoffs. Since all 4 leagues have 4 rounds of playoffs and they're all relatively the same, it made it quite easy to just make it 15 points for making the playoffs added to their score. And then if they make it to the second round, they'll get 20. If they make it to the third round, they'll get 25. If they lose in the finals, they'll get 30. And if they win the championship in their league, they'll get 40. But say you win the championship, you just get 40. You don't get all the points below you. So it's what round you get exited at is how many points you get. For playoff wins, it was pretty much the exact same process as regular season wins. I just took however many, like the average amount of wins they can take, and then divided that by the common denominator that I chose, which for a playoff win I chose is 15. And then that left me with NHL and NBA at 1.06, having the exact same playoff format. The NFL at 3.75 for a win, and MLB 1.25 for a win. So I ran into a couple problems on my way. One of them was I originally planned on doing losses as a stat, but I realized quickly that would just be the exact same as wins, and they would just contradict each other. Because if a team has, say, an 82-game season and wins 60, well, then we know that they're going to lose 22. So it makes the stat irrelevant. I was also going to do playoff points for and playoff points against, but that's not an easily accessible stat for 2 out of the 4 leagues. 2 leagues have it. I can't remember off the top of my head which ones, but 2 of them have it. 2 of them don't. So that made it so I couldn't use that stat. And then finally, the biggest one was for the Vegas Golden Knights. Being the only team to have not played 5 years in pro sports right now, I decided to round up their 2 current seasons as if those were all 5 seasons, just because I wanted to include them to see how well they would do, because they have been a pretty good team over their first 2 years. So that's what I did for Vegas Golden Knights, and just let's get into the results. Coming in at last place at 123rd is the New York Knicks. Obviously, you can see there's a lot of zeros. They have not gone to the playoffs in the last 5 years. One of very few teams to have not gone to the playoffs in the last 5 years. They actually have relatively decent win stats because they have been in like 9th place a couple times. But just the fact that they've never gone to the playoffs is the reason they're down so far. 3 spots ahead of them, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, the lowest team to have actually made a playoff berth. And as you can see, they actually made the 3rd round that year. But every other regular season has been just brutal for them, bringing them down to 120th. Next up at 110th is the Edmonton Oilers. They have also gone to the playoffs. They made it to the 2nd round, I think 3 years ago. And this was another problem that I had where they were very good this season, but there was no playoffs to go off of, so I had to leave this NHL and this NBA season out of it. So that's why the Oilers are so low. Coming in at 98th is the Vancouver Canucks, who actually have worse playoff statistics than the Edmonton Oilers, but have been a notoriously better regular season team over the last 5 years, putting us ahead of Edmonton, so take that, Mr. Q. Skipping way up to 53rd now, we have the Toronto Blue Jays, the only Canadian baseball team that we have. They had a couple of impressive playoff runs a couple years ago, but over the last 2 years have been quite a weak team, which dropped them quite far down in the rankings. Next up, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are notorious for being a bad team. As you can see, they have been eliminated from the playoffs in the first round 3 times in the last 5 years. They're the only team to be eliminated in the first round that many times in the last 5 years. But overall, they've been a very good regular season team. It just gets overshadowed by how bad they are in the playoffs, so that's how they got so high. Next, we have America's baseball team. The Yankees have been a force in the playoffs every year. They win a lot of games. They just haven't been able to go the distance yet in the last 5 years. Very good regular season team, very good scoring team, very good defending team. Brought them very high in this list. Coming in at 23rd is the defending NBA champion Toronto Raptors. A lot of playoff experience this team's had. They've gone to the playoffs all 5 years out of their last 5. Good winning team, good scoring team, good defending team, just all around pretty solid scorer for the Toronto Raptors. Next up in 18th spot are the Cleveland Cavaliers, the team with the most championship losses in the last 5 years. They've lost 3 times, all to the Golden State Warriors. They also beat the Golden State Warriors once in the championship. And that season, despite the Warriors losing in the finals, is actually the highest single season scoring season that I had. And they didn't end up winning the championship. They lost to Cleveland. So that's a pretty cool thing to happen. Next up, we have the Vegas Golden Knights, the newest team, as I mentioned earlier. They've only played 2 seasons. But if you take those 2 seasons and stretch them across 5, they're actually the 16th best team in North America, which surprised me. I guess a little bit because they were a very good team those first 2 years. They still are a very good team. So, 16th spot for Vegas. Coming in at 10th spot is the Pittsburgh Steelers of the NFL. Never gone to the championship in the last 5 years, but they're just a dominant regular season team every year. They do make the playoffs every season, but usually fall short, but still a high enough score from their high scoring, their good defense, and their regular season success. Coming in at 6th spot is the Houston Astros, the best team in baseball. They got a score of 916. They've won a championship. They've lost in the finals. They've lost in the 3rd round. They've lost in the 2nd round. Great regular season team. Just a lot of success. Very controversial team, but nonetheless, 6th spot. Coming in at 3rd place is the best team in the NHL in the past 5 years. The Pittsburgh Penguins with a score of 989 make Pittsburgh the only city to have 2 teams in the top 10. In 2nd place, we have the New England Patriots. Everyone knows that the Patriots were the bullies of the NFL for the last 5 years. 2 championships, 1 Super Bowl loss, 1 3rd-round appearance. Last year got knocked out in the 1st round, which was the end of their dynasty, kind of. But just amazing numbers you can see from their wins, their points for, and their playoff wins especially. They've just been dominant and are very deserving of the 2nd spot. Coming in at number 1 from the NBA is the Golden State Warriors, kind of by a long shot too. They've been to the championship 5 times. They've won it 3 times. They've just been a force, and there's no question that they were going to come first.